Okay guys, this is some folks in RC groups asked me to kind of explain this E-flight modification and different retract modification for the FMS 1700mm Mustang. As you can see here, this is the E-flight. I went ahead and unscrewed this and mounted it in here. Okay, V8 did this originally. This is what he's talking about. The ones I have here are the 85-degree 6120 E-flight retracts. Okay, the stock struts will fit in them. Okay, but you're gonna have to shave off about 3 to 4 millimeters, like he stated earlier, off of the little 4mm peg that's on the bottom here in order to sit in these. This is the modification you have to do with the E-flights. Okay, because it's too long, it'll set the strut up too high, so the wheel will end up over here instead of right here. Okay, this is the modification you're going to need to the actual strut. This hole, what he's talking about, you have to make a relief. This is all plastic hard mount right here. These are a little longer than the stock ones. So let me zoom down here. You see we made a little hole right there in the plastic mount, and that's to allow for the recess for that. That's on the bottom of the E-flight retracts. That's so that will sit down through the hole. Okay? Also, because they're longer this way, front to back, thumb and forefinger there, have to cut this part out right here and hollow it down. It actually ends, you can see the line right there. This is plastic. I did all this with an X-Acto knife and just cut this out so that the E-flight retract will sit in there. I'll show you on the other one. See? It's a little longer than the stock PTZs fit in there. Now then, back over here again. The hole pattern for the E-flights will exactly match up with the original stock holes. You'll notice I've got some extra holes in there because I tried the Hobby King retracts. Okay, I had plastic trunnions in them, and this is what I was flying with on that video you guys saw I do. But my last flight out last weekend, they over-centered. I had a really hard landing, and they over-centered. They were holding up pretty good. These are rated to 10 pounds. This plane weighs 10 pounds, so it is pushing their weight limit. These would probably work real well with the metal trunnions. If you can set it down fairly, it'll take a hard landing if you can set it down fairly easy. You do need to, you'll notice here, I took my Dremel tool and a round drum, and I kind of sanded this down in an arc, because with the stock strut, which you don't have to modify at all to put on this, as a matter of fact you have to shim some washers underneath here and it'll fit right in to keep it from jamming, because it comes down and presses against this, and I didn't want to, I kind of did sand a flat spot, you'll see right there. For this retract, for this strut on this retract, it just kind of makes relief. This is used by set screws on both sides, left and right. I made my own set screws. One of them's flush and the other one's recessed here, which is what that little cutout for on the Hobby King retracts is for. You have to cut out a little thing there, and that's to allow for that nut, that bolt right there. If you can make your own grub screws to put in there, like this, like I made there, then you don't need to do that, but I didn't. On one side I did. This guy fits right down in here, but the hole pattern is a little different, and that's what my extra holes right there are for, just off a little bit, was for mounting this retract right here. If you're not using this one, the bolt pattern on the E-flights is identical to the stock gear. It's just the 4mm peg, those two grub screws, you're going to have to cut about 3 to 4 millimeters off. Let me see if I can find a piece of it here. Here's one. Had to take a Dremel wheel and cut off about that much. Okay? And then you have to, like he stated earlier, you have to grind a flat spot on the back for those two grub screws to set to hold it. Okay? For the 85s, I actually have two pretty thick washers just kind of tacked in right there and there to set it up, because the 85 is a little too much, and if you're using the 90s he's talking about here, you put the washer on the back so it'll bring in a little more. Problem is it may force the wheel down deeper in the well. Okay, drop right in once you've made those, and you can do those with those little cutouts with an X-Acto knife, or if you've got a Dremel, makes it a little easier. Be real careful right here on this when you're cutting this one, because that's real close to the top of the wing skin. All you need to do is just hollow out just a little bit of foam, 1/16 of an inch deep, and relieve that plastic so that zip tie on the bottom there will sit down there, because it sits down pretty close. The Army's talking about this guy right here. If you're using the E-flights, you may need to fashion you a new one, which is easy to do with a pair of needle nose pliers and just curls. And that's for the door fairing. I didn't have to do mine, but as if you'll notice, I drilled an extra hole with a little drill bit, and I'm mounting mine out here on the outside hole. The inside hole is the stock hole. Okay? If I put this up here in the stock location, when I retract this gear, it does pull on it a little bit of the door. You'll see it kind of stress a little bit. I just made a new hole because it's just a little bitty screw, and moved it up forward, and it's fine, so I could use the original one. But if I need to, like he said, and he's actually correct, depending on how these fit in your particular plane application, everybody's will be off just a little bit from, you know, the next person. You may need to fashion you a new one of these, which is real easy to do. You can see it's just a rod with 2 curls in it that go around the screw, and make you a longer one or shorter one. Who knows? It's actually, if you wanted to, you can make 2 of them, put 2 of these on here and go across the gear. Would make it really nice and firm. They're only using 1 here. But that's the E-flights in there. Uses the original stock holes. You have to make a cutout because the E-flight retract is just a bit longer, and you have to make that hole right there. On the Hobby King ones, you don't need this hole, you don't need this cutout, but you will need this cutout unless you replace the set screws that are in here. I used Allen heads. They originally had Phillips that stick out the bottom because it pinches from the side, and it actually lines up with the original flat spot, so you don't have to do anything to the strut, but you have to make the recess there on the side, either 1 or 2, unless you do grub screws, to allow for that right there. As you can see, that's got to clear that wall right there. And then this is a drop-in replacement, with the exception of that cutout right there, and then you can the whole new hole pattern. The outside holes there, that's actually just a dirt spot there on the inside. The 2 outside holes are for the Hobby King. The 2 inside holes are for the stock gear and the E-flights. That's how far apart they are. Get down a little closer, somebody can take a peek at that. Don't mind this little cutout right here. It's where I misjudged. It was actually supposed to be that. It misjudged that it actually shouldn't be there. If I had the right spot the first time, you wouldn't see that. That cutout's for the Hobby King, not needed for any of the other 2. That's the only mod you got to make. And you only have to modify this. You may or may not have to modify this for the E-flights. This worked perfectly with the Hobby Kings, just like it was originally stock. As a matter of fact, that is the original stock one I still have on there. I haven't had to make a change because I just moved it a 1/16 or so of an inch. I can still use the stock one. That's the gear. That's my light mod. I now have my Dimension Engineering lights in here, and they're set to go. Pretty bright white lights. Go ahead and retract this gear for you guys one time. Oops, wrong switch. Now let me set this camera down and I'll plug in the lights. I'm actually going to have these on a switch, so they will turn on and off when the gear retracts, and I'll show you a little bit more about these lights here in just a minute. Okay, there's both my landing lights on. That actually closes with the door. These particular ones aren't signal operated, so I've still got to hook up the control module. Now then make another set of lights here that I got. You can kind of see here. If you guys go to the dimensioning engineering site that I posted earlier, these are actually signal control lights, but they're a little bigger. They use bigger LEDs. But these will actually turn on and off, and they're very bright. Oops, don't tell me I just blew that one up. Nope, I just didn't plug it in right. Oh, that's because I don't have the signal on. But these are controlled with signal. Oops, I gotta plug this into the retract area. But if you wire these to the retracts, let me disconnect one of the retracts here. And just plug this light in for demonstration purposes. You'll notice it's on when the retracts are down. And when the retracts go up, it turns off. Retracts up, lights on. Retracted, light off. Retract extended, light on. These are $15 a piece, pretty nice, but they're a little bigger than I expected them to be, so I'm not going to be using them for this particular application. I'm going to be going with the smaller LED type. You can see these. I like them because they're real small and tight, may not look exactly scale, but when this thing's bright you can't see the thing anyway. It's nearly blinding. And then my gear door comes down, hits that little roller wheel, folds that right back. Springs right up. You guys saw me where I posted this earlier, my little spring mod. I'm still using my rubber band one, but my new hinges came in today from Sonictronics thanks to the lead on the link that I was told that they didn't have these anymore, and they actually do carry these spring loaded, and I would recommend the spring loaded ones as opposed to my little homemade rubber band job here, because the rubber band eventually over time will degrade and pop out. But this is our brake. Eventually when this does break, I'll replace it with one of my good spring ones. In the meantime, I'm just going to go ahead and use it. There's the thing. If you mount them without these shim washers on here, the 85 degrees is just a little too much, in my opinion. And I think a lot of the other guys are probably sharing the same opinion that have already done this. I went ahead and waited and changed mine out. But I'm actually going to modify, I'm still working on modifying these a little bit. I'm going to take the 85 degrees and I'm going to change, get this back up here. I'm actually going to Dremel this out just a little more and change the thing here so that these are like 87.5, 88 degrees, because 90 is too much and 85 seems to be a little because of the dihedral in this particular wing. If it was a mortal scale wing, these would be perfect, but this dihedral in this wing is kind of somewhere in between, which is causing it one set of retracts to be bowed in too much and the other set of retracts to be bowed out too much. But hope that helps some of you guys who are considering this mod. I recommend the E-Flight Retracts. They're rated to 15 pounds. They're gonna hold up a lot better. You can use the stock strut, but you are gonna have to cut off. Show everybody here. You are gonna have to cut off about that much of the bottom of the pin that's in this guy right here, and file you a flat spot. Play with it a little bit so that your wheels will line up and be straight up and down, or with a slight bit of toe in. I've actually got mine perfectly straight so that they sit in here better. Something else I forgot to mention earlier, which I did way back at the beginning, you'll notice that my main gear doors are probably bowed more than most y'all's. I took a heat gun and actually increased the bow on these. And the purpose being is I noticed they rubbed the wheels when the stock gear were in. So with a little bit of bow, they help clear the wheel if it doesn't quite seat down well enough or deeper into the well. And it also helped it line up a little bit easier on the inside and not maybe overlap the gap. Just a low heat gun or a hair dryer, heat this up, and I just bowed them in a little more. And that's what I've done to my doors right there, is increase the arc. They're a little flatter when you get yours from the stock. I've actually heated them up, and since they're plastic, they'll hold it. Just disconnect it. Disconnect this right here. Take you a screwdriver and put it in between here and this. pop this door out of the hinge. It pops out pretty easy if you're careful, and you don't want to break those two plastic pin hinges there, but this will come out and allow you to take these two gear doors off this plastic housing and do the bowing on it. And then of course you can see where I've got I use some of the smoke paint to kind of highlight around the areas to make it stand out a little more, a little over dramatized, but it makes it a little more visible in the, up in the air when it's down and so forth. And landing lights, and again, this is the other side of the retract. Cut out here, it's about, you're going to have to take out about a 1/2 inch. Extend that about a 1/2 inch, cut out the plastic, and then, once again, a whole relief, and V8 was talking about this in the last thread. I promised everybody I'd get this video up, so I'm doing it real quick here. This hole right here, and this for the E-flights. These are the best retracts that I think are going to be suited for the model. The Hobby Kings will fit in, different bolt pattern. You're going to have to make a little recess here unless you put grub screws, which are flush and don't protrude, on both sides of this, as they screw in and they put on both sides of the stock strut, which has flat spots on the front and back of it. E-flight needs one on the side of it, so you have to make one there. The stock PTZ gears, my new PTZ gears came in today from, actually yesterday from FMS. These are the replacements. They're new and improved replacements, and to me they look exactly like stock ones, except they don't have the cutout for the micro switch. They didn't paint this black. It is metal, except that they use 3 grub screws. One here on the back, and then there's 2 on the insides here, which hold it pretty good. And the reason you don't have to put a washer as a cutoff is because they had this built-in top piece right here, which is designed for that strut. So I'm going to save these as a backup because they'll just drop right back in if I need to put them back in. And I'm going to buy another set of just struts and tires. And right now the only place I know to get those is from Banana Hobbies. But that's the mod right there. Hope everybody kind of likes that, and that kind of helps explain things a little better. If not, send me a PM and I'll try and post up some more. Talk to you guys later. Bye.